everybody, it's Wednesday, June 12th, 2024. Welcome to the NFL Fantasy Football Podcast, where we stopped believing in cover jinxes years ago. It's me, your man, MG Marcas Grant, Michael Florio, back from New York. LaQuan Jones, who hasn't been to New York in a while because he lives in Los Angeles now. Florio, welcome back, man. How was the trip?
The trip was awesome. Thank you two first for holding it down last week. I love going back home, getting to see all my friends. My nieces and nephews are awesome. So shout out Dominic, Dorian, Penny. Loved spending all weekend with you guys. And if my voice sounds a little hoarse, it's because I spent the entire weekend from morning till night playing with a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, and an 11-year-old. So
nice.
That tends to happen.
It tends to happen, and chances are you may have picked up a virus or something too,
yes,
because kids are germ factories. So you might have picked up something along the way there. So, but welcome back. I know you were actually going to be out hitting the road, heading to America's finest city for a couple days, correct?
Yeah, because I got to go see from on my side of the family, like my nieces and nephews, and now Nicolette's nephew. They're in San Diego for the week. So tomorrow morning we're driving down for a few days. And look, this is what we were talking about a couple weeks ago in the pod. It's June. This is one of the few months where we could just kind of like pick up and go.
Yep. 100%. I don't know if you've looked. The Padres are in town. The A's are visiting. I would think the tickets should be easy to come by if you decide you want to head to
beautiful park.
District. Yeah, go walk around Petco Park for a day. I would recommend it. That's all I'm saying. We got plenty to talk about today. We are going to do some hype train or smoke screen. It's been a while since we've done one. We've had OTAs come and go. So obviously there's some things we're talking about there. We'll also talk some early round movers when it comes to best ball drafts and that sort of thing, and kind of figure out whether or not we would draft these guys at their current ADP. But first, let's start with a little bit of news. This one came out on Tuesday morning, and that is because Christian McCaffrey is now the cover man for the new Madden game, Madden 25. So I will ask you this, LaQuan, as the resident 49er hater. McCaffrey is sort of the 1.01 in most drafts. So we kind of need him to succeed, but you as a Ram fan and Niner hater would certainly like to prey on his downfall. How are you feeling about him being on the cover right now?
Well, confirmed, I will not be purchasing because I can't have that in the house. But I really feel as though Aaron Donald should have been on the cover. The guy goes out on top, retirement, the GOAT. Like, what are we doing here? Missed opportunity. I'm not a fan of it, to be honest.
All right. Well, then what I will do for you is I will print out a picture of Aaron Donald and you can glue it to the cover of Madden and have your own special edition.
Come on. That's not how that works now. It's all digital gaming now, man. You can't get the cover, the physical.
That's true.
I will look, download games all the time, but last year when Josh Allen was on the cover, I went to a GameStop and bought a physical copy of the game. Now it's so annoying because I need to have the disc in to play the game, but I can have that cover. I got to make it part of my backdrop forever now. So,
I mean, if you were really a fan, you would buy the physical copy and download the digital copy.
Oh,
double dip. Double up and have both. And then not to worry about the disc, putting the disc into the console either.
We're so lazy now.
But Florio, I mean, the cover jinx is dead, right? This isn't a thing anymore, is it?
No, because, I mean, Josh Allen was on it last year, and people were like, I'm fading him, and he finished as the QB1. Who is it the year prior? I got to pull up the...
I know Lamar Jackson, Tom Brady. Oh, Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, Mahomes still went on to have a great year. Like it's long dead, the Madden curse. But what'll happen is if something happens to Christian McCaffrey this year, everyone will point to it and say that's why.
Yeah. Other than just, hey, he plays football, man, and sometimes things happen. Sometimes guys get hurt. Sometimes guys play poorly.
You play it safe and you put Aaron Donald on the cover. There's no Madden curse. We're done.
That's what
I'm not going to let it die.
Put guys who retired the year before on the cover. We'll just do that at this point. Yeah. Speaking of guys retiring, Darren Waller announced his retirement after 8 seasons in the NFL. LaQuan, was it because he had enough of NFL football, or was it because he couldn't go back in the locker room after the music video he released?
It might be a little bit of both, honestly, because, man, I actually sat there and listened to the entire song, and this ain't it. I'm gonna just be honest. This ain't it. This ain't getting no iPod love, none whatsoever.
Well, I mean, I think basically he was trying to get some love from his now ex-wife or soon-to-be ex-wife, Kelsey Plum.
That's not how you get her back. You just made her run away further with this song.
I mean, I don't know if you've seen shots of her, Florio. She is certainly living her best life. It looks like Kelsey Plum has very much moved on. I mean, I know they're in the midst of the WNBA season, but seeing her pre and post game fits, I think she's moved on at this point.
Yeah, I agree, but I'm not gonna hate on Darren Waller. Look, we've all been in this position, right?
True.
And like, there's much worse ways he could have went and handled this. So. I'm not. Look, he's at a low point in life right now. So Waller, I didn't. It's not the best song ever, but I think it got a little too much hate. Give him a little bit of time. We've seen a lot of athletes be terrible as rappers, but maybe he could be one of the few that figures it out.
Well, look, you're right. We have all sort of gone out and done maybe some weird things that we regret after breakups, after tough breakups. Who among us hasn't posted an auto-tuned rap video on YouTube and the internet for the whole world to see?
As a former rapper, I have not.
No. All right. Well, I have a question about that a little bit later on. But let's actually talk about the football part of this, because obviously he was a big part when he was healthy of the Giants offense. He is now gone. Now, presumably, Malik Neighbors is the number one target there for Big Blue this year, but that begs the question, who is now the number two pass catcher for Daniel Jones and the Giants?
This is a good question, because you had Wando Robinson, who led the team in receptions last year, and the guy only started 13 games, and I feel as though you have somebody that's as explosive, somebody you can utilize multiple ways in the offense, where I think he steps up as the second, target of this offense, where, you're hoping that this offense can gel together somewhat to move downfield, to find ways to create some scoring opportunities, and hopefully Daniel Jones can stay healthy. So, I mean, I honestly think, Darius Slayton's not out of the question either. He's been pretty consistent with like 700-yard seasons. So it could be really a toss-up between those two.
Any interest in either of those guys, Florio? Or maybe in who's next at tight end, be it Daniel Bellinger or Theo Johnson? Anybody there that really sort of moves the needle for you?
Moves the needle? Not really. Like, I don't find myself really going after Giants guys, especially the later you get. I mean, after Malik Neighbors, it completely thins out. But if I am taking a shot on anyone, I like Jalen Hyatt, because right now we're talking best ball. Like, he is very explosive. He can win downfield, but you don't have to try to guess in best ball when those big long catches and those touchdowns are going to come. So I think he's a player that could have a lot of spike weeks, even if they're tough to figure out when. Like in redraft, he might be a player that you're pulling your hair out with. But in best ball, I definitely think he could come through in some of those games. But it'll probably be Darius Slayton, who leads them in receiving yards basically every year since he's been there. I think there's 1 year he didn't lead them since he's joined the Giants. But he's just more of a safe floor kind of guy, and even the floor isn't all that high. As for the tight ends, though, Theo Johnson is one. And then look, we're talking about your last pick in best ball, or even more so probably for redraft, like someone that blossoms throughout the year off the waiver wire. But he is huge and he is fast. He's 6'6", and he ran a 4.57 since 2003. He is just the fourth tight end that size to run that fast. One of the others was Jimmy Graham. So he could be a yak guy for them, but even more than that, I think he can be their go-to guy in the red zone if things break right for him. So yeah, talking about like an 18th round pick or someone just to kind of write down in your redraft leagues. I'm more excited for Johnson than Bellinger. We kind of know what Bellinger is at this point.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of where I am. I've been drafting Malik Neighbors. I don't know that there's another Giant that I've drafted really since then. And I think I do feel like Malik Neighbors, by the way, his ADP has gotten pushed up in part. I mean, one, because, he's going to be the number one receiver there. He's a guy that we love. We love his talent. But also because I think the assumption has been for a long time that Darren Waller is going to retire. And so because of that, people are like, well, let me get in on Malik Neighbors as the one thing we feel like we can count on in this offense. Beyond that, though, it has been kind of sketchy about who we really believe in there for New York. Before we get off this topic, though, LaQuan, you mentioned being a rapper. If I remember, I think I've seen one of your videos. Maybe?
We got to play one on a pod, I think.
It's somewhere out there on YouTube. I'm not going to disclose my rap name, but you'll find it probably.
But anyway, who had the better rap career? Is it Darren Waller? Is it Antonio Brown? Or is it Cole Beasley?
Oh, man. I got to tell you, one night out, I heard AB come on. So throw that ish on. That's somewhat of a banger out there. So he's obviously he's the bar right now.
Is he?
I mean, with the choices we have, yes.
I think, look, whatever your feelings on Cole Beasley's, stances on, politics and vaccine, whatever, I honestly think he was kind of the best of the three. Like, Antonio Brown always made me cringe. Everything he's put out there has been cringe-worthy. Waller, I think, is just kind of meh. I weirdly think Beasley might be the best of the three.
Which is crazy.
I think AB, just because, one, he's worked with Kanye, which is insane, and two, he's like performed at festivals and stuff, so I think that gives him. But if we're talking best, I think the best football player rapper is Arian Foster.
Oh, I forgot about Phenom.
Oh,
that's right. Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, I think that's
I forget all these things happen. They just come and go sometimes. Like
I did. By the way, you mentioned Antonio Brown working with Kanye. I mean, that feels like two peas in a pod. Those guys.
Same person.
Those guys. It's not a surprise that they would have worked together. It feels like they belong together for sure. All right, back to the football stuff. Jordan Love says he believes the Packers don't have to have a number one wide receiver. And Florio, we sort of saw that last year, whether it was Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Doubs, all these guys sort of getting involved. If you had to designate somebody as the wide receiver one in Green Bay, who would that be?
I think it's Jaden Reed. And I think from like the first half of the year, they didn't really have a guy. But as the second half of the year progressed, I think it became pretty clear that like Jaden Reed was carving out a role here where like they are going to generate touches for him because Reed can do it all. He can be utilized as a runner and is a really good yak receiver. He can stretch the field a bit. But I do agree. I mean, when you have four different wide receivers that you're excited about and that you want to get the ball to, you don't have a clear-cut number one. And while Reed is the one that I feel best about, he is the one that you have to pay a premium for out of this group. So as much as I like him and everything, I do kind of find myself taking him in a couple of drafts, but then also taking shots on like Dontavian Wicks, who goes really late, and Christian Watson at where he's going, something like wide receiver 45, is just someone I can't quit because we know how explosive he is. And I understand all the risk with Watson and the hamstring and that he let down last year, and him and Jordan Love have terrible like numbers when you break it down like on a per target basis and stuff. But like where he's going, he's still really cheap, and I'm like he's got huge play capability and a very high ceiling for fantasy purposes.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, too, because when Jordan Love took over as the starting quarterback, Aaron Rodgers had left to go to New York. There was a big conversation about how much Aaron Rodgers contributed to Christian Watson's success. I don't know that we have a definitive answer on that just because he still hasn't been completely healthy. But LaQuan, I mean, let's talk redrafts, right? Because I think in best ball, we're all willing to take those shots because you don't have to worry about sliding them into a lineup on a week-to-week basis. Looking at the Fantasy Pros consensus ADP. Now, mind you, this is mostly based on best ball drafts, but let's talk a redraft thing here, right? Reed, Watson, Doubs, Wicks. Are we overdrafting them? I mean, how much does it move the needle? How much does it move their ADPs if we're talking about having to decipher when they're going to go off on a weekly basis?
Maybe a little bit on Reed, but I'm willing to gamble on Reed just based on the fantasy opportunities that are created for him. But Watson, he's still going a little too high for me, being that with the injury history, like availability, it's your best ability here. And I'd rather, fade Watson, taking on the risk. I know we're hearing good things coming out of camp about his hamstring and everything like that, but it's just way too much risk there, especially for redraft when you're going to have a guy that's probably going to be on your bench most weeks, and then you're probably going to miss out on those really big weeks because you're too cautious about the injury or about the underperformance. So To answer that question, you go for Wicks. You go for Wicks, who's shown the ability to show up, show out with the limited opportunities. We see how explosive he is. We saw the immediate connection between him and Jordan Love. So you have the upside there, and he's the cheapest wide receiver out of the Green Bay Packers offense. So if you want a piece of it, I would take the gamble on Reed, and then you could play it safe and take Wicks so he could show up and be ready for when his name is called.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing with Wicks, because right now, wide receiver 60, there is very little risk involved in drafting him. But, I mean, Florio just feels like a kind of thing where you draft him, and does he ever see the lineup? Because you're like, well, it feels like the odds of him giving you like 3.5 points are greater than those opportunities where he gives you, 12 to 15 points. It just, the Packers feel very scary to me. The wide receivers, I should say, feel very scary to me as a group. I don't know if you feel the same way.
No, I do, and I don't have a ton of exposure to really any of the outside of Jayden Reed, because Jayden Reed is the one that is going to be out there in 3 wide receiver sets. I'm pretty confident he'll be out there in 2 wide receiver sets. If healthy, I feel the same way about Christian Watson. Like, he will be on the field because of what he can give you and stuff like that. Dobbs is the one that I'm fading because I think he's more of a safe floor player, and I think the floors is still kind of risky because one of these guys is going to be the odd man out when they're all healthy. And I know like problems like that tend to work themselves out, but it took injuries to other guys for Wicks to get out there last year. And even Romeo Dobbs, with the year he had, it was very touchdown propped up. It was propped up by his 8 touchdowns. So he's not a guy that I think you can rely on big plays or yardage or anything like that. So largely it's Reed for me, but even there, I'm like, I don't find myself going into drafts being like, I need to get one of these Packers wide receivers.
Yeah, I think the upside there, and somebody pointed out to me a couple of weeks ago, that it's very similar to what we have in Houston with Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and Stephon Diggs. The difference being the Packers guys are a lot cheaper when it comes to ADP than any of the guys you're going after in Houston. Last bit of news, Zamir White, Alexander Madison say they are, quote, in this together as they aim to replace Josh Jacobs. We have sort of looked at this is Zamir White's backfield. I've joked on this show that, once Josh Jacobs left, everybody on fantasy Twitter was like, hey, man, it's a Zamir White season. And then they signed Alexander Madison, and fantasy Twitter was like, hey, man, it's Zamir White season. Like, nobody really moved on that. Now, I mean, Florio, I do think that Zamir White is going to be the lead running back, but maybe have we overestimated how much the Raiders want to lean on him? I mean, is there a fear that maybe Alexander Madison gets more work than we anticipated?
I don't know. I've never been a big Alexander Madison guy. Like last year, he was one of my biggest fades coming into the year. And I know you could say a lot of what I was saying about Alexander Madison last year about Zamir White, that it's a lot easier to be the guy when you're being asked to get those 20 touches for a game or two here or there rather than for 17 games. But when Zamir White took over down the stretch last year, he was awesome. Like, he averaged 20 carries per game, 95 yards, not a ton of pass catching chops. So my one concern, and the thing I've been thinking a lot with this Raiders backfield is like, who's going to be that secondary back that gets involved in the passing game? But I don't think that's going to be Alexander Madison's role either. I think Madison's role on this team is going to kind of be what it was on the Vikings. Like, if our starter goes down, you are now the guy. Like, you're going to get that role. But on a week-to-week basis, I don't think he's going to have a clear-cut RB2 role. And you talk about Zamir White, where he's getting drafted right now as a low-end RB2. I'm all about taking him because at that price, you're already kind of, I think, getting him closer to the floor than the ceiling. I do believe if Zamir White stays healthy this year, he could finish as a low-end RB1 because I think the Raiders want to run the ball, and I think they want their identity to kind of be ground and pound. So I'm cool taking Zamir White where he's going, and Alexander Madison does not scare me off.
Are you cool with Zamir White right now, LaQuan?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we don't have to worry about Alexander Madison finding the end zone. I mean, 17 attempts under 10 yards, 0 touchdowns. I mean, that's pretty nasty work there. So I think you gotta kind of have that locked up in his role as the RB1 for the Raiders. We already know red zone duty. He'll be able to excel there. Find the end zone, put some points on the board. So I'm okay with getting where he's at right now. I just think we should keep it on the hush so we can get the value on him. I don't want to see his ADP push way too high and then it becomes nasty work.
Yeah, I mean, I could kind of get down with that. I don't know. Something is telling me that maybe we see more Madison than we anticipate, at least early on. Maybe we get midway through the season and the Raiders are like, oh, wait a minute. We don't like this. And then they go back to Zamir White heavily.
Yeah.
But I just feel like early on, we might be a little bit disappointed in
Dylan
the amount of work.
Luabe, the rookie,
Yeah.
he's a sleeper there, I think.
Oh,
Yeah,
he's been getting a lot of love.
I go back and forth on that, right? Because like I went early into this draft season thinking like he's got some sleeper value, and maybe he does, but it feels like in OTAs you weren't hearing his name a lot. And in fact, occasionally Amir Abdullah's name still pops up.
That's another one.
Not that I think Amir Abdullah is like worth drafting, but I feel like he's that guy who can sort of wreck your year.
I think one of those two have the best chances of being the pass catching back for the Raiders. And yeah, it'll be inconsistent usage and stuff like that. But games where they're trailing and they have to throw a lot, I could see those guys surprising.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think early on, I think I drafted some of Lobby, and maybe I'll go back to him a little bit depending on how things shake out when we get to training camp and that sort of thing. But who knows? Who knows? It's been a while since we had played any hype train or smoke screen, and so it felt like this is a good time to do it because we've got news. At least we have reports out of OTAs and that sort of thing, and that's good enough to let us kind of come up with our own theories on some things. So I got 4 different talking points here. We can decide if it's a hype train or a smoke screen. This one coming from Pittsburgh, from beat writer Mark Caboli, who says Pat Freiermuth, quote, could have a breakout year. And that basically it looks like he and Russell Wilson have found a connection so far in OTAs. I mean, we have liked Freiermuth, I think, at times. I don't think he's ever completely lived up to what we hoped he could be. I don't know that it's always been his fault, LaQuan, but after you see these reports about him having a breakout year, hype train or smoke screen?
Hype train. I'm actually for it. And he's always been somewhat of a productive tight end when it comes to yards per route, when it comes to him just getting open in his utility. It's just he just wasn't able to hit his full fantasy potential due to the quarterback play. So you have somewhat of an upgrade here with the quarterback play and decision making. And we know Russell Wilson tends to lean on targets that he can trust as well. And I think Pat Freiermuth getting this much hype early in the train, I'm here for it, man.
Hype train, smoke screen, Florio.
I think it's a hype train because of the ADP. Like, you're getting him as a tight end 2, and he's one of my favorite tight end 2s to take. Like, he was awful last year, but I agree with LaQuan. It was because of the quarterback play. And he also struggled to stay on the field last year. But Russell Wilson has shown us that he can get the tight ends involved, especially in the red zone. He loves going to his big body tight ends. And Justin Fields, if and when he takes over, has shown us that he can sustain a fantasy tight end and get the most out of them. He made Cole Kmet very fantasy relevant. So as potentially the number 2 target in this offense at tight end 14, I'm cool with taking him there.
I'm on the hype train for it as well because, as you mentioned, it always feels like Russell Wilson wants to get his tight ends involved. I think we saw that in Seattle. I'm not sure how it worked in Denver because he could never keep his tight ends healthy. And I guess to some extent that was sort of the thing with the Seahawks as well. They could never keep a healthy tight end. So in terms of wanting to get Freiermuth involved, knowing how talented he is, I'm all about the hype train there. My fear though is, is Russell Wilson going to be the jinx that doesn't allow Pat Freiermuth to stay healthy? I know that's more, correlation than causation sort of thing. Like, I don't know that Russell Wilson is the reason guys get hurt, but it just seems like his tight ends never stay healthy. So that, is my own little personal.
They're on hospital balls or something.
I don't know, man. I guess I'd have to go back and look, but I don't know if that. For whatever reason, the tight ends just don't seem to stay healthy around Russell Wilson. I don't get it. In Tennessee, Tyler Boyd says Will Levis, quote, tried to do too much last year and can, quote, rely more on his playmakers. We know they've got DeAndre Hopkins. We know that they got Calvin Ridley. They go out, they get Tyler Boyd. They have pass catching running backs in Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears. Last year it was sort of up and down on this one, Florio. I mean, so let's just say about Will Levis. Are you hype training Will Levis, or is this all a smokescreen?
Hype train. In fact, Will Levis is one of my favorite quarterbacks to take a shot on at where he's going right now. I mean, he's going out like quarterback 23, 24, something like that in ADP right now. And I've been taking a lot of him. Last year, he led the NFL deep pass percentage. 21% of his throws went 20 or more air yards. Every other starter was 14% or less. He also led the league in hero throws at something like 9%, and it was like almost double the next closest guy or something like that. He did lock in on his first read 73% of the time, so Tyler Boyd is right there. He can develop more and learn to read a defense better and spread the ball out a little bit more. There's a lot of area for growth with Will Levis, but just the fact that he's going to be heaving the ball downfield, the fact that we're already hearing that Brian Callahan and co. plan on throwing the ball way more than the Titans have in past years when Mike Vrabel was there and Derrick Henry was there. I think this Titans offense is going to look very different than anything we've seen out of them for years. And look, I don't care how it translates in real life, but for fantasy, Will Levis has a high upside, has a high ceiling. I think he could be something like, remember that year with Blake Bortles, where like the Jags were just losing, but he was putting up big numbers? Because that could be Will Levis this year, and I'm all about taking him where he's going.
The reason Blake Bortles put up big numbers that year is because usually in the first half of games, he was throwing multiple interceptions and putting them behind, and then having to go out and throw. I mean, he was a prime candidate. He was sort of the pre-Jameis Winston. It was kind of what he was doing that year. LaQuan, are you in on Will Levis? You buying in on him this year?
Yes, I am. I mean, the value on him is great. QB2, where you can get him late in drafts and best ball right now. Redraft, everybody's going to be down on him. I'm here for Tyler Boyd speaking up for his QB because he's such a great addition to that offense as well, being that the way they're going to be able to utilize him to get these third downs, converted. I think that was the biggest problem for Will Levis there. I mean, he had a 16 passer rating when targeting DeAndre Hopkins on third down. That is disgusting. He's your best player, and you probably couldn't name any other wide receiver other than Treylon Burks and DeAndre Hopkins.
Hey, man, put some respect on Nick Westbrook-Akina's name.
Oh, you know what? I put some respect on it because, yes, I did pick him up off the waivers one time. But, again, I just feel as though they just did right by him this year. So I'm jumping on the train.
I don't know that I'm all in like you guys are, but I do think there's reason to be optimistic. The fact that they have built around him. And, we've talked about it with Carolina, how they've tried to build around Bryce Young. They have done the same thing around Will Levis. And I think to your point, Florio, this is going to be a very different looking Titans offense than what we were used to seeing with Derrick Henry gone, and just a complete overhaul of the coaching staff. It's not going to look like any Titans offenses we have seen in the past at all. A couple things out of Minnesota. One, defensive tackle Harrison Phillips says the Vikings, quote, have two true number one running backs when it comes to Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler. LaQuan, I'll stick with you. Hype train or smoke screen on this one?
Smoke screen for sure. I think they're just trying to hype up Ty Chandler to put some, fire under his butt, to do good through camp. I think this is Aaron Jones's backfield, to be honest. I mean, I'm not really going to be handcuffing, Ty Chandler if I do get Aaron Jones. So I'm just going to go with the notion like, okay, this is just camp talk.
You feeling that way too, Florio, or is there maybe something potentially there with Ty Chandler?
I think he can be utilized as like a RB2 there. What worries me is like Aaron Jones has been heavily propped up in fantasy because of a heavy involvement in the passing game throughout his career. Ty Chandler is a bigger threat to come in on third downs or take a full drive, something like that, than A.J. Dillon was, because A.J. Dillon does not have good hands. He's not good in the passing game. So Ty Chandler is definitely a bigger risk there. But I agree with LQ, with LaQuan. I'm not like baiting Aaron Jones because of Ty Chandler or anything like that. Although I also don't find myself really actively going after Aaron Jones because he is 29 years old and struggled to stay on the field last year, saw a little bit of dip in production until late in the year where he just boomed. Like, I still think he has talent there and stuff, but 29 years old for a player who's already struggled to stay on the field in his career, if he falls to me at the right price, I'm cool taking him, but he's not like a big target of mine going into my drafts.
I'm sort of down on the Vikings. I'm not drafting any of them, I think, at ADP. If I get them to fall, then I will look at drafting Vikings, but I'm not taking any of them at cost right now, just because I have a lot of questions about the quarterback play and what that's going to mean for the offense in general. I'm going to say smokescreen on this one. I'm going to say it's Harrison Phillips trying to be a good teammate and pump up the guys around him. I think they've got a borderline number one running back in Aaron Jones, and then they've got a guy who can fill in nicely in Ty Chandler when they need him to. Last one, and I'm going to say, I know this is going to be smokescreen. I just wanted to talk about it because it was just funny to me. LaQuan, the Vikings coaches reportedly are, quote, blown away by Robert Tonyan. Your thoughts?
I mean, you can see my face. I know this is an audio broadcast, but my face is scrunched up. Like, what are we doing here? This is a smokescreen. I mean, this dude's just trying to collect all the division rings here, just be on each team that he could be on. And he's a good guy. He's probably a great locker room guy. So I feel like they just, put this out there, just say, like, hey, man, this guy's great, man. He's great for the team. But this is definitely a smokescreen.
Yeah, I mean, okay, let's talk about this, though, Florio, right? Knowing that TJ Hawkinson is not going to be ready at the start of the year, may not be till mid to later in the year. Is there any potential value there with Tonyan?
No, because I don't even know if he's going to be the next tight end up. Like Josh Oliver, Johnny Munt, N'Keal Harry making the move to tight end. Like, that's one that I was like, look, I know it doesn't really mean a whole lot, but maybe it means a little something until TJ Hawkinson comes back and is back. But last year, Adam Rank was accusing Robert Tonyan of being a double agent for the Packers. So he had 1 year where he was heavily propped up by Aaron Rodgers, throwing him into the red zone. Mm-hmm. Besides that, we know who Robert Tonyan is.
Yeah.
Big Bob, man. He had that 1 year, as you mentioned, and hasn't come to anything close to that. But yeah, that to me was the epitome of a June hype train or smokescreen comment. When I saw that kind of coming across my Twitter timeline, I'm like, what are we doing here? Come on.
He's probably a good guy. He's probably a nice guy.
I'm sure he's a really wonderful human being. In terms of our fantasy teams, we are not interested at all in Robert Tonyan. Doing a little something new here on the show. It's time to drive your draft, presented by the all-new hybrid Toyota Camry. We're talking about just some draft strategies as we get into the midst of best ball summer. I mean, we are here in mid-June, and I'm sure everybody has done a ton of drafts. Let me double check, make sure I am not on the clock. Ooh, it appears that I am. I just went on the clock. I got time. All right, so here we go. We're going to talk about some early round movers, rounds 1 through 5, in best ball drafts. Now, I picked guys who have moved over the last week. So from Monday to Monday, call it June 3rd to June 10th. We'll talk about some of those guys who have made the biggest jumps, rises or falls, and whether or not you would draft them at their current ADP. So start with CJ Stroud. He is currently at 53.7, has moved 6.5 spots down. He has fallen 6.5 spots in the past week or so. Look, 53.7, LaQuan, you're talking about getting him in the 5th round at this point. Are you okay? Smash or pass at that ADP?
I'll smash there. I think that's a great value where you can get him at. I honestly have him as my top 5, quarterback this season. So if he's in the 5th round, he's dropping down, spots, I'm going to take him. I think honestly what's happening is guys are getting pushed up because of the pre-camp hype. And I think, all right, I'll take the guy that I want anyway.
I mean, is that where you're at with him? I know, Florio, you do like CJ Stroud, 53, 53rd pick. Are you okay with it there?
I'm okay with it, but I'm going to pass because he's going right around where Anthony Richardson is going, and I'd rather Anthony Richardson because I think the upside is, like, he's a video game cheat code at playing quarterback. I think he has the capability of just completely breaking fantasy football in the next couple of years. But then after that, like, to me, CJ Stroud is very similar to Joe Burrow. Neither of them run a lot. They both have high-powered offenses. I understand that Stroud doesn't have the injury concerns as Burrow, but I could wait multiple rounds and get like a round or two and get Joe Burrow. I could wait multiple rounds and get Kyler Murray or Dak Prescott. To me, these guys are all in the same tier. Stroud is the highest that I have ranked of this group, but if I could get a 3-4 round discount and still get a quarterback in the same tier, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, it's funny too, because I think what you said is going to be a big litmus test for people is how do you feel about CJ Stroud versus Anthony Richardson? They both have potentially similar ceilings. How they go about it is going to be very, very different. And I think it really does determine how you feel about each guy, whether or not you're going to make that move or which guy you're going to take right around that same time. I would probably tend to be pass just because I tend to lean more to the Anthony Richardson side. No fault on anybody who's taking CJ Stroud at that point. Like, I have no issue with it whatsoever. I just have been more toward Richardson in drafts. That's it. James Cook, He is down 6.4 spots to 55.1. So, Florio, smash or pass on the Bills' number one running back at that spot?
I might surprise you guys, but I don't think I have a single James Cook share yet. And last summer, I was one of the very vocal supporters of James. From like the moment his rookie year ended, I was like, James Cook is someone that you should be all about drafting in fantasy. And it came through last year, but I think that the Bills looked at it and they were like, Cook was really good down the stretch when we used him. But after that, remember after that Cowboys game where he had all of that work, he did kind of slow down. And I think they want to get a second running back utilized here. And I think Ray Davis is a bigger threat to not only take away vital like touches near the goal line and short yards usage, but he's a good pass catching back as well. So he could take full drives away from James Cook. Plus, as much as I hated the usage last year, like the Bills just didn't really trust James Cook a whole lot near the goal line. So if his touchdown upside is capped, that you're taking him as a low-end RB2, high-end, low-end RB1, high-end RB2, that's kind of what his ceiling is if the touchdown's capped. So I have been passing, unfortunately, on my guy, Jimmy Cook.
All right, so Florio's not in on James Cook. Are you in, LQ?
No, I am not in, just based on the magic name he said, Ray Davis, man. This guy has his head on the swivel, great in the passing game, and I think he's going to be a huge factor in that red zone to where you're going to be getting James Cook, in those early rounds. You're not going to be very happy, what you paid for him and versus what your expectations were for him. I mean, honestly, you have to look at the value that you can get in 2 rounds later at that running back position rather than taking the risk here with a guy with like James Cook, who's going to be very limited for your team.
Yeah, the name you guys mentioned is the name that I was thinking about. It was Ray Davis there. This feels a little bit too spicy for me to get James Cook. Now, if he falls another 4 or 5 spots, then maybe we can talk about it again. But right now, I can't quite do that. Over to Green Bay, Josh Jacobs is 39.2. He has fallen 6.2 spots rather in the last week or so. I mean, LaQuan, I've been hearing more and more about Marshawn Lloyd over the last couple of weeks. So inside the top 40 picks, smash or pass on Josh Jacobs?
I'm going to pass. I mean, I'm a little worried about his injury history. I'm a little worried about Marshawn Lloyd as well, how he's being talked up so early. And I honestly think that, they look at Josh Jacobs as a workhorse, and I think they're going to run him. But I'm not quite sure if I can take him in those early rounds just based on how I've been approaching drafts as of late. Like, I haven't been going very hard on running backs in the early rounds. I've kind of just been waiting until that 5th, 6th round or the 6th, 7th round to even try to get an RB that's going to be able to put up fantasy points in my games.
I mean, Florio, do you believe Josh Jacobs is going to get the same level of attention in Green Bay that he did in Las Vegas? Is that worth taking him inside the top 40?
I think early on he will. I think they paid him a lot of money, especially for this year. So I think early on he is going to be force-fed the ball. And my thinking originally was like the Packers have always had 2 running backs largely because they kind of had to. And Josh Jacobs could be what A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones kind of gave them individually all in one package. But the reason I'm passing on Josh Jacobs is because he might just be dust at this point. Like last year, he had the fewest fantasy points per game over expectation. And I had him on a couple of teams last year. He was really struggling despite having a stranglehold on the volume in that backfield and getting close to 20 touches a game every game. And he was still struggling to produce that. So not getting really any discount on him from what we were paying last season for him. It's scary for me. And this range, I know this is still, we're talking like 3rd, 4th round for these running backs. I think that this is where the dead zone is this year because they're all attractive names that you could sell yourself a story like this guy could easily be top 5, top 10, but there's so much risk with these guys. So to me, I'd rather wait till like 7th, 8th round before I start taking my running backs.
Yeah, I feel like this is a good spot to get wide receivers, right, in these rounds here. Or if you decide you want to pivot and maybe get a quarterback or a tight end, I think you can do that in that situation. But I'm kind of nervous about the running backs there. Rashad White, 56.8. He's down 5.8 spots. LaQuan, are we okay with Rashad White right there?
Again, it's a little bit high for me. It's a little bit high for me to be getting these running backs, but I would feel a lot safer if I do take him, being that I don't think Bucky Irvin is a huge factor there, more so of a Marshawn Lloyd, behind him or stuff like that. I think more so, Rashad White, you're banking on that he sees as many targets, which I don't think will happen again, but he will get his fair share of that workload to where you could be okay with him as your RB2.
Last year, Florio, part of what made Rashad White valuable in fantasy is that they stopped handing the ball to him as much and they started throwing it to him as much. Do we think we can count on that? And does that make you feel better about his ADP?
No, I have not been taking Rashad White. Look, if he continues to get the targets, then he'll be an RB1, probably low end, but that's what you're paying for him right now. Mm-hmm. So I feel like you're paying for close to the ceiling. Last season, it's all him, CMC, Breece Hall were the only running backs, only players with 500 rush and receiving yards, but he had the fewest rush yards over expectation. He was largely propped up by touchdowns as well, 8 touchdowns in the second half of the season. And if they kept the same OC, I'd have less concerns, but now you're changing your play caller there as well. We already know as good of a pass catcher as he is one of the least effective runners at the position. So I'm concerned. And I do think, while I'm not scared because of Bucky Irving, I do believe that he is a bigger threat than Sean Tucker was. There was no one behind Rashad White last year, that they had no choice but to find ways to get this guy the ball and let him do his thing. So I've never been the biggest Rashad White fan. People who watched this last season in Fantasy Live know that. But I just think there's a lot of risk that could make this go very wrong. So again, to me, this is the dead zone where I'm avoiding all these running backs that are going.
I just have this feeling that years from now, we're going to look back and be like, last year was the peak of Rashad White, right? That he's just never going to come close to anything like that. What did he have? 9 total touchdowns, 1,500 scrimmage yards. It just doesn't feel like he's going to get close to that ever again. All right. Go ahead.
I was going to add, I think a lot of that had to do with Chris Godwin, not playing primarily in the slot. That offense just wasn't what it used to be of where he was used to. So those targets and dump balls had to go somewhere.
All right. This one is going to be directed at you, LaQuan, at least first. Kyren Williams down 5.6 spots to 24.6, which means he was going inside the top 20 originally. Now he's still inside the top 25, just barely. It's sort of before that dead zone. He's a Ram. Are you going to smash or pass inside the top 25 for Kyren Williams?
I'm so torn. I'm on the fence with it. There's some leagues I have exposure where I'm taking him in that second and third round, and then there's some leagues where I'm I'm just going to stick my guns and just punt at the running back because the injury history, the injury bug on his jacket is always going to worry me. Every single week I'm going to be holding my breath, and you have a threat back there like Blake Corum who can really, really, excel in that red zone. So you might see the dip off in the touchdowns. You might see a dip off in his usage just to keep him healthy for a season long. I know Sean McVay has been chasing this 1-2 punch for years now with Cam Akers, Darrell Henderson. Malcolm Brown was even involved in that backfield as well, trying to be that 1-2 punch. And I honestly think people are not accounting how good Blake Corum was last year. And he's a touchdown scorer and he's a touchdown getter. So I think a lot of people need to be hesitant of taking him. So I'm going to pass.
All right. For you, Florio, has Williams fallen enough or does he need to fall a little bit more?
He's getting pretty close to the point where I'm perfectly fine taking him. The only running back that goes after him that I would like to see them flip is Derrick Henry, because Derrick Henry in round 3 is an auto draft for me right now. But Kyren Williams is getting pretty close to that range where Henry's going. And while I agree with everything LaQuan said, it's at some point this guy's going to fall further enough where we're he was the RB2 last year once he took over, and he was legitimately putting up CMC type numbers for a good stretch of that run. I don't trust McVay usage-wise with running backs, but I do trust that McVay will get the most out of the run game for the Rams. I trust that this offense, as long as Stafford stays healthy, will be one of the better offenses in football. So I'm the further he falls, the more I'm coming back in on Kyren Williams. That being said, though, I do think if you take Williams, Blake Corum is a handcuff that you have to pair with him. Some backfields don't have one. The Rams very much so do. So if I can get the two of them, and the thing is, where Corum's going is not it's insanely expensive. So you very much so can get those two guys together, and then you have your bases covered.
I think we're at a spot where I'm a lot more comfortable with Kyren Williams. In the top 20, I don't think I could have made the move. I think as we get closer to 25, and if he somehow falls beyond that, then I'm absolutely all in on it, mostly because of what you guys said. Blake Corum is the guy that I'm concerned about. Corum I've been drafting a lot of because I think he's going to have a role anyway, and then if something were to happen to Kyren Williams, then he steps in and gets a whole lot more touches. So if Williams tumbles a few more spots, then I'm 100% on. But even now at almost pick 25, I'm a lot more comfortable than I was, say, about a month ago about him. Last one, because I want to get somebody in there who's moving the other way. Amari Cooper has moved up nearly 5 spots, 4.8 spots to 46.9. Florio, I know in the past you have been a big Amari Cooper guy. Are you an Amari Cooper guy right now?
Yes, 100% in, because I don't understand why people insist on pushing this guy down. In his last 6 seasons, 5 of the 6 of them, he has been a top 20 wide receiver in total fantasy points, and 5 of the 6 of them, he's been top 24 in points per game. His ADP is going outside of the top 24 wide receivers now, closer to 30 than it is to 24. And then his numbers also last season were kind of thrown off a bit by the games where Joe Flacco and Deshaun Watson didn't start. Remember, the Browns were throwing out XFL quarterbacks. I'm drawing a blank on the quarterback's name, but those games were bad. But with Watson or Flacco, he averaged 18.4 fantasy points per game. That would have been wide receiver 6. You're getting this guy outside of the top 25 wide receivers. He's one of the most consistent guys year in and year out. He's going to be the number 1 target again for the Browns. Yeah, I'm firmly in, and I don't know why he continues to get disrespected.
Dorian Thompson-Robinson.
That's it.
PJ Walker, Jeff Driscoll, take your pick. All those guys started
bad.
They all started. They all started Bad Not Good, which is a great band, by the way. Go check them out. LaQuan, are you cool with Amari Cooper at 46.9 or somewhere around there?
Absolutely. I mean, he's one of those most disrespected ADP guys that ends up outperforming his ADP, and we know that they're going to be passing the ball a ton. I mean, they don't have Nick Chubb healthy back there, so those targets, and they're going to be a very pass-heavy offense with a solid defense as well. So I think it's going to be an efficient offense. You hope Deshaun Watson takes a step forward, but I think Amari Cooper has always been a great wide receiver too for my roster. So every time I see him there, I'm just going to take him.
I mean, I just feel like he's the guy that we know we can count on in that offense. And I'm hoping that, it would be great to see Deshaun Watson take a big step forward, but I just need Deshaun Watson to not be awful. And I think he can sort of pay off at that price.
And stay healthy.
That's it. Just, Watson stays healthy, Cooper stays healthy. As long as Watson is not an absolute disaster under center, then I think Amari Cooper is worth having at that price. So I see why he has moved up. I would like for that to sort of plateau. Like, I don't want to see him move up too much more, but right there at about pick 46, 47, I'm okay to make that happen there. There you go. That was Drive Your Draft. Oh, go ahead.
I would say, as long as someone doesn't take out his quarterback in a celebrity softball game.
Yeah, that part. let's hope we avoid that. Anyway, that was Drive Your Draft, presented by the all-new hybrid Toyota Camry. Whatever your vibe, it's a Camry vibe. Learn more at toyota.com/Camry. Are you guys on the clock in any best ball drafts right now?
No, I am not.
Let's see. Let me look. I am on. And now it's going to take forever for me to load this up as I'm sitting here trying to do this and be sort of clever. I am on the clock right now. With the, let's see, I've got the 19th overall pick. I have already taken Bijan Robinson. I got him at number 6, weirdly enough. I mean, that's kind of amazing to me. So I'm going to come back, and I'm going to take my shot at Nico Collins.
Ooh.
Their pick number 19. There he is.
Lock it in.
Lock it in. Ooh. Nico Collins at number 19 in a best ball draft. There you go. That was just live drafting for you here on the show. And that's a good spot for us to take a pause for a little bit. We're back with you, of course, on Thursday for the cheat sheet. Are we talking Godzilla -1 this week? Have you watched it yet? Have you? We got to make sure Florio's watched it first before we.
I haven't, but I'm going to this afternoon.
All right, there we go. So then we will
Locked in.
talk some Godzilla -1 on the fantasy cheat sheet. We'll talk some other football stuff too, but that's not, why we do the show. In the meantime, thanks to Susie for putting the show together. As always, for Florio, for LaQuan, I am Marcus. That'll do it for this edition of the NFL Fantasy Football Podcast. Stay happy, safe, and healthy. Do good and live well. Enjoy the week, everybody. We'll talk to you again real soon.